welcome to today's episode of Radiant Success TV, where we ask experts to share their stories so they can inspire you, they can introduce you to new innovative ideas, and they can motivate you to use your gifts to be as successful and impactful as you can be. I'm Janice Pettit, and today my guest is Robert Ferguson. Now, Robert is an axiologist. Do you know what that is? Because I didn't. He's actually an expert on company values. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about his background. Since 2011, he's been speaking to audiences all over the United States on the importance and impact of company values, clearly defined values, and there couldn't be a better time for that than right now. And he talks to them about how the values affect their companies and how they affect the results they get, how they strengthen the company brand and create a competitive advantage. Robert has more than 20 years of experience as a strategic marketer, and he's worked with everything from startups to Fortune 500 companies. In fact, as a partner in one of Canada's largest independent marketing firms, he worked with companies like Sprint, Fedex, Nortel, Siemens, and more. One of his clients, the president and CEO of StructureTec, said that he is one of the best presenters we have invited to our program, and his presentation, which is called Forging Values, was spot on, and it had a great impact on our audience. So I'd like to welcome Robert Ferguson.
Thanks, Janice.
I'm so glad you're here.
Happy to be here.
You know, I find this topic absolutely fascinating. And actually, I heard you speak, and the first time I heard you speak, I was so impressed because it was something I hadn't really given much thought to. So you were primarily a marketing expert before you got into values. What was the catalyst? What happened back in the early 2000s that spurred your interest in company values and made you pursue research and pursue that path?
In 2000 and 2001, I witnessed the collapse of some pretty big companies, Enron, WorldCom, and Global Crossing, and some others. And I thought, is it possible that these companies with tens of thousands of employees are like all bad? And no, there's a few bad people at the top. But I witnessed how they lost focus and understanding who they are, and no company's too big to fail, I've learned. And so really, values became the core of my initial research. And then in 2009, when Nortel declared bankruptcy, that really shook me after 12 years working with them as a client. And that's when I started my research.
Mm-hmm. So tell me what happened, what did you see happening when there was not a strong value system in a company?
I'll give you a case of walking through the halls of Nortel, and I could meet one person and ask, they would tell me, here's what we want to do, and I was a marketer, okay, I'll help you. I'd go to somebody else, and it was like two separate companies. And I'm like, how did two people in the same company not understand the same business they're in? And values brings focus. And if I said, well, what's the most important thing here? And they'd say quality. And somebody else might say, no, it's service. And somebody else might say, oh, no, it's innovation. Which is it? And that's what I noticed is the lack of understanding of what's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. So I think most companies say they have values. What's the difference between saying you have values and actually making it part of your daily practice in your business?
It starts at the top. When senior leaders understand and state out loud, and you can witness their behavior maps to those few values. That's the number one problem, is most companies have too many values. And when they do that and they live it, then others say, oh, I guess that matters. I would also add, if you're prepared to fire somebody for violating a value, then you know it's important.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when companies actually decide they're not just going to talk about values, they're going to make sure that that infiltrates their entire business? What needs to change?
Well, what needs to change is everyone understands this is what matters here. We hire on those, and it just becomes almost part of the culture. A classic one I think of is Volvo. Everywhere I go, I ask the question, which automotive company owns the value of safety? Almost every hand will say Volvo. And when you look at them and you look at their marketing, There's a great video on YouTube you can see of Jean-Claude Van Damme doing the splits across this two trucks going backwards on their mirrors. I mean, it looks very dangerous. What they're doing is introducing a new safety feature called dynamic steering. And it's just the whole company's built around, we want to introduce new safety features. When I saw that, I was like, forget about Jean-Claude Van Damme. That truck's going backwards straight. How do they do that? I would say more innovation around safety has probably come out of Volvo than anyone else. So that's a classic one of when everyone understands why we're here, they're really focused around the thing that matters most, that drives their competitive advantage.
So when you go in and work with a company and you establish the values for that company, which I'm sure is a process, what happens if some of the key players, some of the people at the top, are not in total alignment with the values that everyone else has decided on?
You know, I do have a process I walk people through. There was a startup that the founder had a group of about 8 people and had hired a president because that was not her skill set. And we went through this process, and you know, the next day after we identified the values, he quit.
Really?
And I was shocked. I'm like, I've never had a president quit. But she was thrilled because he recognized those values are not why he was there. And it brought clarity. He wasn't the right one for that company. So learning sooner than later who's the right people that need to be there, that's important.
So is it difficult, once a company says we're going to go through this process, we're going to sit down and we're going to establish what our values are. Do some companies not have any values?
Actually, most of the people that I have looked at, they suggest only 10% of all companies have stated values.
Have stated values. Okay, so they think they're in their head, but they haven't actually talked about them.
Everyone actually has values, they just haven't defined them, and you just have to observe their behavior. So when somebody says, well, they don't seem very honest, well, now you know one of their values is not honesty. It's there, but are they bringing it out to make it clear this is how we filter all of our decision-making and our behavior?
So I'm thinking of people who may be watching us today who are starting a business, who have a small business that's growing. They haven't really thought about this topic. First of all, I'd like you to give me an example of some values that are very important, that many companies decide are important. And also, I'm wondering, once they decide on those values, how do they actually, on a day-to-day basis, make sure that their employees are living by those values?
Well, to answer the first part, I have researched the Fortune 500 and discovered there's 17 values that seem common across every company. Number 1 being integrity, shouldn't surprise. Number 2 being respect. Number 3 is excellence or quality, and then there's lots more. So every company, the employees, customers, the owners, suppliers, we expect every company to have all of these values to some degree. So if you're starting a company, you can go to my website, you find all 17 there, and just, yeah, we have those. But what sets you apart? If you look at your competitors or those that you're planning to compete with, is there a set of values that you can own that are unique to you, relevant to your customers, and sustainable over time? That's what I call the values test. Then you're really clear of who we hire, how we behave, that separates us from our competitors. And I think that's very important.
And of course, you're saying that trickles down into the branding, the marketing,
Absolutely.
And everybody has to be on board with that.
Yep.
And how does that change customer reaction?
Well, there's 2 parts. If you've been in business a while, customers already, one of the research things I love to do is I ask customers in one word, describe the brand of this company. For example, I ask everybody everywhere, in one word, can you describe the brand Walmart? And everyone can do it. They're like, cheap.
Is that a value?
No, well, it is. Well, I'm a marketer. I can turn that into a value called frugality. So Walmart has 4 values: integrity, respect, excellence, and service, which I shake my head because I'm thinking, service is not what I get from Walmart. If they would claim frugality, they'd be much more on brand. And so being true to who you are, that's really what I'm trying to get to.
And then the customer really gets who you are.
Yes. And employees, if they would reward their 2.2 million employees for help us be frugal, it would make sense.
Yeah. This is really a fascinating topic. So I know that you traveled the United States. In fact, didn't you mention to me that in 2015 you and your wife got in an RV and you traveled all over the U.S.?
For over a year.
Wow.
Yeah, talking to business leaders about values, that was my theme, forging values, because I believe if you take Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, we have a lot of good companies. The way to get from good to great, as Jim Collins highlights in his book, is You need to be clear on what your values are that separate you from others and raise them up to the top. And if we did that, we'd make an economic impact in this country like never before.
So if all companies, if all the Fortune 500 companies followed your advice, what do you think that would change in our economy or even in the world?
Well, number one, we hopefully would not have any more Enrons and WorldComs and Nortels that collapse. We would have companies that are really clear in understanding who they are, and the profitability would be secure. People would be migrating to those organizations they want to work for because it would be so clear what they represent. I just think the economic impact would be massive when we now compete globally. We're now competing with, outsourcing to the Philippines or the BRIC, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China. Well, how can we in America step up? I think values are the secret.
And it would improve transparency?
Very much so.
And impact?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Excellent. That's what we're all about.
Absolutely.
Robert, thank you. Thank you. And I'd like you to just tell our viewers where they can find you and where they can find more information about your wonderful talks and about the values that you have defined.
Absolutely. They go to fergusonvalues.com. That's my website. They'll find also the 17 common values. I've also written how to define your differentiating values, and you can get all of that on the website.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Radiant Success TV. We really appreciate our viewers, and we hope today's guest has made an impact on you.